Hello and welcome to the Battelle Climate Challenge webinar, all about climate resiliency and learning about this challenge. I am so excited for this webinar to get going. We have some amazing guests here today that are going to speak to you all about climate and education, and we're going to learn about the challenge and learn how you can dive in and create those amazing entries. So my name is Deanne Bell. I am the founder and CEO of Future Engineers, and Future Engineers is honored to be administering this challenge for Battelle. And I think to kick things off, I just want to do a little bit of an orientation of how things are going to go today. And to point out, if you look on the side of your screen, if you look in the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see that there is a question and answer section, and you're welcome to submit questions all throughout this webinar. And when our speakers come on stage, they're going to be giving their many presentations, and then we're going to have a Q&A session where we're going to be taking questions live from the audience. So feel free, if you want to go over there and just say hi and say, what state you're from and all that kind of stuff. That'll be great, and we can see that. And then we're going to go ahead and get going. So first and foremost, we just want to give you an overview all about the Battelle Climate Challenge. So I'm going to start with showing some slides and give you a bit of a walkthrough about this challenge, what it's all about, how awesome it is, how you can participate, and when those entries are due. So give me a second here so I can share screens and show us slides. All right, I think actually, let me go here. Hopefully you can see this. Yay, everyone sees it. Okay, great. So the challenge. So first and foremost, you need to go to futureengineers.org/Battelle Climate Challenge. And if you go there, you don't have to go there right now, but if you go there after the session, you will see all of the details you need to know about the challenge, all of the education resources available for you, all the different brainstorming buckets, and as well, that is the portal where you will submit your entries. And so the Battelle Climate Challenge is open to 9th to 12th grade students in the United States. And your challenge is to research past and future impacts of climate-related hazards in your community. And it could include drought, wildfire, flooding, extreme heat, and there's other considerations on the website as well. And then you need to develop a proposed action to help build a more resilient community. And this challenge is really unique in that it focuses on local. We know that, you might live by a coastline, you might live in the mountains, you might live in the desert or the plains. And all of those local considerations are what's going to make your entry unique. So we really want you to research, the climate-related hazards in your local community and figure out and develop a proposed action to help build a more resilient community. And we're going to talk a bit about resiliency and what that is today. So as far as the challenge itself and what your entry should be, your entry needs to include two major things, right? It needs an image, which is a poster that supports your climate action. So once you have your idea, think about how you would, present that. How would you present that to maybe someone in your community, someone at your school, someone in your local government? So think about a poster that kind of explains what that climate action is. And then also you need to write a written explanation of your climate action with a maximum of 200 words. So it's not super long, you need to be succinct, and then you're going to submit all of those entries by January 19th on the website, which is right there, futureengineers.org/Battelle Climate Challenge. And you might be thinking, okay, so where do I even dive in? Like, how do I get into this challenge? So if you go to the website, there are definitely resources for you to, do research about the local climate hazards in your community. But we really also encourage you on the website to go through some of these 5 steps to resilience to really go through your entry development process. So that first step is understanding exposure and climate hazards. So what's the normal climate for your community? What's changing or what's likely to change? And then you're going to assess risk. So what aspects of your community will be affected? Is it roads? Is it parks? Is it schools? Is it businesses? What are there unique things in your community that would be definitely impacted with a climate hazard, right? And then investigate options. This is really the brainstorming process, right? So you're going to think about all these different ideas and all these different possible ways that you could build a more resilient community. And when I talk about resiliency, I really like to say it's kind of that ability for something to get knocked down and come back up. So how are you going to build things stronger or better or with more resiliency? So your climate action, it could be a variety of things, right? So it could be a technology solution. It could be an invention that you come up with. It could be a change of behavior. It could be something that you invite all of the students at your school to do. It could be a community program that you start. It could be a response plan, like what to do when there is a devastating climate event, or more. It can be really whatever you think of, whether it's policy, whether it's entrenchment of some new social behavior, or whether it's technology and an innovation that's really going to push things further. So the next step is prioritize and plan. So you want to develop a plan to implement your proposed climate action. I should say that for this challenge, you just need a proposed plan. You don't need to actually do that plan. Of course, if you want to do that plan, that's awesome. But just know for the purpose of this challenge, it's really just a part of a proposal. And then in terms of take action, so just like I said, this challenge is asking for a proposed climate action. You won't be judged on whether you actually did this or not. But of course, we hope after you participate in this climate challenge, you take it to your local community and you try to get things in action. And of course, it wouldn't be a challenge or a competition if there aren't prizes. And there are some phenomenal prizes that Battelle has put together for this challenge. There's going to be one grand prize winner who will present their poster at the Innovations in Climate Resiliency Conference in Columbus, Ohio, which I've been to, and Columbus is so fun. And the grand prize winner will receive a $5,000 STEM grant to the school or nonprofit, library, or education organization of their choice. And then, of course, we're going to have 4 finalists as well, and each of those are going to receive $1,500 STEM grants for the nonprofit of their choice. And then we have 10 semifinalists who will receive a sustainable prize pack. And the timeline is really important. As I mentioned, that big date to remember is January 19th. That's when the entries are due. So you can start all that brainstorming now. And you're going to learn so much from our speakers today that I think is going to help kickstart some of these ideas. And then the semifinalists and finalists are announced in March. Then we've got those finalist interviews and those grand prize winners announced in April. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing these slides. And, we talked a little bit about this time frame and how we're going to announce semifinalists, finalists, and winners. And I'm so excited that our first speaker today is actually the winner of the inaugural Battelle Climate Challenge from last year. And I'm going to bring Ashley Nguyen to this stage. So go ahead and come on stage and join us. I'm going to give a little introduction of Ashley, but I'm so excited. Hi, Ashley. Thanks so much for joining us here today. I'm so excited for you guys to hear from her. Not only is she going to talk a little bit about her, her passions for what she does, share her project, her winning project from last year, but also talk about, now she's a freshman in college, I hear. And so she's going to just chat with you about her experience and her passion and her experience with this challenge. So here we go. So Ashley Nguyen is the national winner for the 2022-23 Battelle Climate Challenge. And Ashley is a freshman now at UC Berkeley, pursuing a double major in molecular environmental biology and data science. She has a deep passion for researching and innovating in the field of climate and environmental science. And during her free time, Ashley enjoys experimenting with graphic design, contemplative stargazing, and exploring nature through hiking. And your winning entry last year, Ashley, was called Seed Bomb, right?
Yes.
Yes. And she got to go to Columbus, Ohio on that grand prize trip, which was really nice. And so we're going to go ahead and pass it over to Ashley. And Ashley, we can't wait to hear from you and hear your presentation.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Dan. I will be sharing my screen with my proposal from last year. So for the Battelle Climate Challenge last year, I proposed Seed Bomb, which is a cost-effective, sustainable, and simple seed-based restoration method aimed to strengthen the resiliency of eelgrass population in coastal areas against sea level rise. This composed of sea mud, clay, silt, and the eelgrass seeds, and these bombs could be dispersed across subtidal zones across eelgrass meadows. And so the purpose of this project that I created was to really shed light onto the issue of coastal erosion that was a huge issue, but a very much not talked enough type of issue in my community. And I wanted to address this by using a innovation that was very sustainable and was something that could be long lasting across generations further on into the years. And so how I came up with this idea was very spontaneous thoughts. There was no one original pinpoint to how I came up with this idea, but I'd say that a lot of times when I'm going through the thoughts of thinking of new innovations, I would jumble them all into one document and then kind of like revise and look back and see what are some of the connections that I could make. But I guess like early on into my stages of creating Seed Bomb, I remember an upperclassman during my freshman year kind of thought this idea of creating a seed ball to disperse in acres of wildfire burnt lands. And so I really loved the idea about using seed ball on a dry condition. And I was, eventually pondering about whether or not this could be used in wet conditions, such as like underwater. And kind of from there, I had another more spontaneous thoughts about like what kind of issues I want to pick within my community. And since I'm specifically from Southern California, a lot of the issues residing there are mostly wildfires, droughts, and but then there's also sea level rise, which was an issue that I thought wasn't commonly discussed in conversations. And so I wanted to tackle an issue that was not emphasized enough, and that this type of issue requires immediate attention and resiliency. And so from there, I kind of really thought about selecting sea level rise, and then another more spontaneous thoughts and kind of thinking from here and there. I started to think about what kind of solutions exist and what kind of things that really align with my skills. And so I knew that technically wise, I wasn't really tech savvy, but I really loved the idea of sustainability and community. And so I wanted to try to incorporate that to Seed Bomb, since it really emphasizes on using materials that was not environmentally harmful, but also was something that a lot of our community, especially my area, could really work on. And so over the months, I kind of really cultivated the idea, and along with just the idea of seed bomb, I really wanted to do this competition mainly to also bring in more representation into this field and also really inspire future generation, especially since we are at the forefront of our future. And so I think that having this opportunity to shed light on an issue that really needs immediate attention was really important to me. And as of today, I'm currently again at UC Berkeley studying two majors, and with my molecular environmental biology major, I kind of really want to focus on innovating, kind of using the idea of microbiology on a more molecular scale to innovate solutions that could really accelerate and mitigate some of our current climate crisis. And then introducing some technologies such as data science. I want to kind of build a more sustainable outlook where we could really incorporate biology related innovations with tech so that it could really kind of open up this solution to worldwide users. So that was something that was really important to me. And with the seed bomb idea, although this wasn't really implemented in real life yet, it was really closely related to another organization that I kind of really looked up to in my community, which was a eelgrass oyster restoration site that was nearby my home. And so that was like another inspiration to this project that I've had. And I guess this really concludes my idea about how I got into Seed Bomb. And I was really excited throughout the project and just really learning about my skill sets, but also really getting to challenge myself and improving my curiosity and leveraging my knowledge and skills.
I would say you leverage your knowledge and skills and then some. It's an amazing presentation, amazing project that you submitted last year. And hyper local, like honestly, I didn't even know about eelgrass. And when you were selected, I was like, whoa, this is amazing. And I think that's what's so great about with this challenge, everyone doing something so local. It's just like there's no one solution that we can just blanket apply to our nation. We all have to really think about our local communities. I have a question because your posters like really clear and crystal clarity in terms of information. And I know not everyone's probably made a poster before. Is that something that was new for you, or had you done something like that? And how did you approach trying to present it like I think there's one tactic, which is like throw a bunch of words on that poster. And then there's another tactic, which is like, no, I want this to be, clear and simple. So I'm just curious about your approach there.
Yeah, of course. So one of my passion that I really loved doing in high school was graphic designing, and so I kind of had a bit of experience with trying to understand how to organize, make the poster visually appealing. Because although even if you have like the most well content and the best information out there, it's really important that you're able to, in a sense, market your idea with visually appealing. Because at the end of the day, you want to be able to grab the users or like the viewers attention with what you have. And so I would say like really important that must be like a balance between visuals element and also the content.
Great. Well, you did a great job with that, and I'm excited to see this year the submissions that come in and kind of how people choose to approach their posters this year as well. I have a question. How's your first year of college? How's it going?
Um, First year of college has been an interesting transition. It's a
Hmm.
bit difficult in the sense that like the coursework are not the same as in high school, but I definitely know that I'm really loving learning. Like right now I'm taking general chemistry, and so I really kind of like a lot of my one of my professors really emphasized sustainability in like labs, green sustainability. So that was really like touching to just kind of be able to work on that. But overall it's a new transition, but I'm very loving here at Berkeley.
Amazing. That's great to hear. I just had like thinking of you, I had a flashback to my freshman year of college and just how much fun it was to be in a dorm. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm grown up, but I don't feel grown up. And then I was taking chemistry, amazing classes, and there's just so much there. Do you feel so you have a combination? I'm curious about this combination between data science and molecular biology. Like, is it because you're like, I like both and I can't pick, or you ultimately feel like these two worlds are going to combine and do these amazing things? What about that combo interests you?
Yeah, so originally throughout high school I wanted to do bio related, just like kind of do biotech and just innovating, researching, working in labs. But as I kind of graduate, especially with the conference that I attended last year, where I got to learn so much from other climate experts, especially those that worked, specifically, I remember the speaker, someone who worked at, I believe, Microsoft, Farm Vibes, and then there's another one that worked at Google Cloud that really inspired me because technology is leveraging a lot of our innovations nowadays. And since it's emerging so many fields, I want to kind of break in and be able to see how sustainability and climate could be mitigated with data science. And I know that carbon emission was something like a huge hot topic related to data science and computer science. And so I kind of want to dip my toes in there, see how it goes, and kind of like be able to have two options after I leave college to see if maybe I should work in the industry or pursue graduate school.
Amazing, amazing. And you are correct. I know when students are researching for their projects, they're going to dive into so much data. And, if you think about everything that's needed to really build more resiliency in the face of climate change, it all kind of starts with understanding the data, right? And being able to make informed decisions and all of that. So it's just really great to see how you're kind of combining those passions together. So thank you so much for joining. And I know I hope you will join us back. I know we're going to go to our next speaker, but then after Mike is done, we're going to bring you back to this stage and we're going to have just a nice open Q&A conversation. So thank you so much for your presentation, Ashley. And now we're going to transition to our next speaker. And I am just so excited. We had this speaker last year and it was one of the best. Mike, I'm just complimenting you. It's like one of the best presentations I've gotten to host. It was so fun. And I'm just going to spill the beans. Like he's seen penguins, folks. It's amazing. And so I'm going to go ahead and introduce you, Mike, so that everyone here watching today knows a bit more about you. But then, of course, we're going to let you give a presentation and educate our students all about the amazing work that you do and that Battelle does. and get them inspired for doing great projects for this Battelle Climate Challenge. So it's my honor to introduce Mike SanClements, who's the Research Initiatives Lead at the National Ecological Observatory Network, affectionately called NEON at Battelle. And from 2015 to 2022, Mike led the terrestrial instrument science team at NEON, providing technical and management oversight of NEON's 47 terrestrial field sites and their instrumentation. So Mike now serves as the Research Initiatives Lead in NEON, and he's authored over 40 scientific publications, received nearly $3 million in external research funding, and has served as the chair-elect of the Soil Science Society of America Division of Forest, Range, and Wildland Soils. Mike joined the NEON program in 2012 as a staff scientist following a postdoctoral appointment at the University of Colorado Boulder's Institute of Arctic and Alpine Research, where he led multiple Antarctic research expeditions. He loves writing, and he's the author of Plastic Purge. He's a finalist for the 2014 Books for Better Life Award, and in that book was published by St. Martin's Press. He lives in Boulder, Colorado with his wife and daughter, where he chairs the City of Boulder Environmental Advisory Board. Talking about keeping it local, Mike keeps it local all the time over in Boulder. And he has a BS in resource conservation, a master's in soil science, and a PhD in ecology and environmental sciences from the University. The last one is from the University of Maine. And you guys can tell it's my great honor to introduce Mike and bring you to the stage. And Mike, I'm just going to pass the microphone over to you to give your presentation.
Thank you so much, Deanne. Appreciate it. Let me go ahead and share my screen here, and we'll get started. Let's see, and hopefully everyone can see that okay? Is that good? All right.
Yes, it is.
Oh, okay, great, thanks. So yeah, hello everyone, I'm Mike SanClements, as Deanne said, and I wanted to take a few minutes today to give a few high-level thoughts on climate resilience. I don't get a lot of time to step back and think at this high level often in my work, and so it's nice to take a few minutes and reflect, and I just hope to share some thoughts on what climate resilience means to me after many years working in this field, and also kind of give you a sense of what is out there when it comes to climate resilience and some of the things you can do as you move forward in your education and career. Because as Ashley mentioned, you are the next generation that's going to be in charge of tackling these problems and solving these problems, and they're massive problems. So giving a little bit of thought on like what climate resilience means, what things can be done, and a little bit of examples of what I've been doing, and then come back to that lower level at the local level to give you some ideas about how you may structure your innovations. And so there's a ton of different definitions of climate resilience. They're all over the place, but they all sort of center around this idea that Deanne mentioned of like, you get knocked down and you get back up, right? But there's different nuances depending on who you look at. So if you look at the Economic Development Agency, EDA, they say it's the ability to anticipate, prepare for, and respond to hazardous events or disturbances related to climate. The IPCC, which is sort of the global body of best knowledge on climate change, says it's a system's ability to anticipate, reduce, accommodate, and recover from disruptions in a timely, efficient, and fair manner. And I really like that definition. I like this idea of doing recovery in a timely way, an efficient way, in a fair manner, so that everyone reaps the benefits of that recovery, and it's not just focused on certain economic or social divisions, right? And so if you look at the left here, you can see a couple of photos, and these are both from recent climate disturbances in Boulder, Colorado. The top one is a fire that occurred last fall, probably 3 miles from my house, 4 miles from my house in town. You could see the fire from our front yard. And then at the bottom is a giant flood that occurred in 2013. That's a bike path downtown. That's a park you're looking at that's filled with the river downtown overflowing. And so these things are happening, and they're happening with increasing frequency. And you start to think about like, well, how do we prepare our communities to deal with that? And what does that mean at a local level and even a global level? And so we also hear about adaptation. And so just to think for a second about adaptation too, because that falls into these, and adaptation, mitigation, resilience, it can kind of get a little confusing sometimes. But at its most basic, adaptation refers to a process that changes of something so that it can better survive in a new environment. And like Deanne said, resilience describes the capacity to come back from shocks or disturbances in that timely, efficient manner. And this bottom bullet here, I would add, on top of this definition, is that you also want to be thinking about how to sustain ecosystem and societal services that support natural and human populations now and into the future. So how do you prepare for things to do the least damage possible, be able to bounce back from them, and think about that in the long term so everyone has the ability to live happily and thrive into the future, whether you be a human population or an animal population. And you can look at these figures from, the city of San Francisco, where they sort of combine mitigation, like reducing emissions with adaptation, and they kind of call that sweet spot in the middle resilience. So it all comes together: adaptation, resilience, mitigation. They're all kind of something that forms together to think about a resilient future in my mind. But when you start to think about what that means, it's a challenging problem, right? There is a growing population on Earth. It is getting quite large, right? And it's anticipated that, in the next coming years, we're going to need 70% more food by 2050 than we needed in 2017 to feed this growing population on Earth. So that's a lot of pressure on Earth's ecosystems and on our ability to feed everyone on Earth, and populations continuing to grow. So we have to think about those kind of things. It's not just a stable problem, right? Populations continuing to grow, so we must increase our resilience, be more resilient as we move into the future. And we need to think about consumption. The number of things that all of us consume across the world continues to grow. And I think about plastic a lot. Plastic, use is up to 300 million tons per year or so at this point. Only about 9% of that plastic gets recycled. It uses about 4% of our global oils and natural gas to produce this plastic. And so how do we think about things like that, continuing to, in the best way possible, support all the different resources we need, right? And plastic has a terrible rap, and we hear a lot about how bad it is, but we also need it. We wouldn't be having this conversation virtually without plastic. Our computers have plastic, our desks have plastic, medical equipment has plastic. So how do we allocate our resources and become resilient enough in the face of climate change to continue to provide both food for our population that's growing and provide all these resources for our population that's growing, right? It's a really big challenge, and we need to be thinking about these things. And then our ecosystems themselves, right? They're under pressure from the changing climate. This is a lodgepole pine stand in Montana. You can see it burned. That's actually a very natural thing for these type of forests, but fire is occurring more frequently in places and with more severity where it hasn't. And we need to think about how we have the resources to control that fire, the pressures on these ecosystems, because these ecosystems provide us our water, they provide us our fiber, they provide us our wood for building and maintaining our lives as well. It's how do we bring all these different things, population, ecosystems, consumption, into this framework of climate resilience, because it all comes together, I think. None of these are isolated problems in my mind anymore. And on top of all this, I think about those things from a very practical standpoint, and thinking about resilience from that standpoint. But there's also this other, more philosophical, if you stand back, part of life. No one just wants to sit around and twiddle their thumbs trying to emit as little carbon as possible, right? Like, we all want to live our lives, and there's a lot of beauty in life, and we want to be able to continue to provide like the foods and the ingredients that like sustain like our local food cultures globally, and be able to travel and see new parts of the world and maintain beautiful ecosystems. We want to be able to like do fun things like, I don't know, go to a Taylor Swift concert, which was amazing, by the way. And, we want to provide for our families, and people want to provide for their children all over the world. And so how do we think about populations and ecosystems and resources in a way that not only does the least harm possible and provides what we need, but also sustains what we think of as the things that make up like the beauty and fun and passion of life, because that's all really important. And so how do we allocate ourselves and prepare our communities to think of what we know now as our life and the resources and ecosystems we thrive and live in, and continue that in the future? And so that's really the approach I think about, is how do you balance all of those things? And so when I step back and start to think about climate resilience, it kind of boils down in my mind to actually everything, which is a little bit, silly to think about, like, okay, everything. Well, what does that mean? Can be really overwhelming, right? Like, everything's affected by this, and everything needs to change, and we need to be thoughtful about everything. And you could get overwhelmed by it, because it is on some level daunting. But I also step back and I think, so climate resilience is a massive topic, but what does that mean? Well, that means you have things like policy and planning that involve, climate resilience. There's opportunities there. There's research for how our climate's changing and what are the effects of that. There's management opportunities, management decisions. How do we best manage our resources in these changing environments? There's the social sciences. How do we get people thinking and together and communicating to make these changes and commit to these policy and planning decisions And there's education. There's educating the next generation. There's educating current generations that may not be aware. There's business and there's communication. And so when I start to think about this, and then I start to think of it not as overwhelming, but as opportunity, right? No matter what you're interested in, whether that be business or data science, like Ashley mentioned, or communications or writing or research or policy or becoming a politician, there's ways to have any one of those careers and career paths interact with and work on these climate problems. And this is reflected if you look at the UN Climate Change Conference, which is coming up. They have one every year, the one that was in 2023. And you think about some of the topics that are there, you can see these are all up here, adaptation and resilience, climate technology, climate finance, education and youth, gender, global stocktail, innovation, land use, market and non-market mechanisms, the science, the ocean. So all these things appear, and there's potential to work on all of these fields right now and across any of these things. And you can work on climate and any one of these topics. And there's so many career choices, there's so many opportunities to be pushing for a better world, which is super exciting to me. And so I just wanted to touch on a few of these and sort of my role, because there's 3 of these, which a lot of my career is focused on, and this first one is research. And Deanne mentioned that I work for the National Ecological Observatory Network. That's a program funded by the National Science Foundation to monitor and provide data on climate change, essentially across the continental United States. So we have 81 field sites. Some are aquatic, some are terrestrial, from Alaska to Puerto Rico and in Hawaii. And for a long time, I've worked on building these research towers across all of these sites, which monitor the flux of carbon from the atmosphere to the ecosystem and back. So that can tell us, are ecosystems emitting carbon and increasing contributions to climate change, or are they sucking up carbon and mitigating contributions to climate change? We can get an understanding of how healthy and how much carbon exchange is going on in all these different ecosystems across the continent, which is really exciting. I've also been working on some really wild projects lately, like one with the Department of Defense, where we're taking permafrost cores across the Arctic and looking to see what diseases might actually thaw out of that permafrost in the future as permafrost thaws, and thinking, is there anything viable in there that could cause problems, that could be new diseases and cause a new pandemic? So that's really exciting. And then I spent, several years in Antarctica thinking about carbon and emitting from glaciers and the McMurdo Dry Valleys. And then, and all this research involves a lot of partners, which is really fun. You get to meet people from all over. This is a picture from a workshop we ran at the National Center for Atmospheric Research recently. And so this is really exciting. And I get to work with people all over on all these different research projects and how they better understanding of what's happening now to ecosystems, but also our projections of what will happen to ecosystems in the future, so we can better prepare and better manage what we need to do. Communications is another part that's really interesting, right? Our science doesn't matter if no one's paying attention to it, and it doesn't matter if we can't inspire people to act. So I find communicating about science and climate resilience really effective and really important. And I've written about a bunch of different topics, whether that be just what it's like to be a scientist in Antarctica and trying to inspire others to think about science, and also how important like long-term environmental change is. And then, what does it mean to think about really what does our plastic footprint as humanity mean for our future, and how does it affect all of us, and what can we do to think about these things? And so when you think about resilience, all these writing and communication tools are really important too. And you can start to think about, even in your innovation projects, how do you communicate with your communities, and think about expanding everyone's knowledge and introducing things and getting your knowledge out there and shared, and your innovations shared to people in your community. And then that sort of communications piece can occur on a lot of different levels. Right now, we're working to integrate all these different global networks from China and Australia and South Africa and Europe and NEON itself into one big global ecosystem research infrastructure network, where we're all talking about how we take our measurements and combining our data to think how we can start to get even a better understanding globally of things like drought, and what does drought mean globally as precipitation patterns shift for agriculture and people and communities across the globe. And that's really fun because you're working across all these cultures, you're traveling, you're meeting new people. And so these are the type of things that can happen as you move forward and think about climate resiliency in different scales. But I want to step back now at the end and just talk about policy at the local level. And so as Deanne mentioned, I've chaired the Environmental Advisory Board of Boulder for the last 5 years. My actually last meeting was 2 months ago. My term is over, which is kind of sad. So I think I want to continue doing things locally. So maybe I'll have to run for like city council or school board or something next. But working at the local level is super rewarding because it takes you from these giant problems which we talked about It gives you a way to affect like tangible, like approachable and change that you can see in your community. And that's so important, I think, for our communities to thrive and be resilient and be adapted, but also for everyone's morale in face of changing climate, right? When you're like working towards the problem, it feels so much better than when you're just sitting around worrying about it. I like the saying, like, get out of your head and into your hands and start like working on things. And so, this is just a quick idea of some of the things that I think has been really cool we worked on in the city of Boulder. Is if you look to the right, there's this map of orange and blue, and that's sort of evening area-wide temperature predictions for the city. And what we're thinking about there is, where are the hot spots in our city? Can we map all these hotspots, get a sense of the hottest parts in our city, and then begin planting more trees in those areas and increasing the canopy and thinking about other things we can do to mitigate that urban heat island, to make these parts of our city that are hot more pleasant for everyone who lives there, and make it a nicer place to live in face of rising temperatures. So that's really exciting. And these are the type of things that I think of as local resilience activities that are like fantastic to consider and can be really powerful. And so in closing, I would say that, in my mind, climate resilience is all encompassing. It's basically everything at this point. And I think it should be considered in all fields and decisions. And that creates a ton of opportunity for interested people to work on solutions across varying fields of interest, no matter what you're into. Like I said before, whether that be business, whether that be data, whether that be communications, education. Acting locally is super rewarding. And it's really exciting that you guys can do this challenge and have the chance to it. And we're all culpable, right? Like, all of us use resources, all of us eat food, all of us emit carbon. So all of us should be working too to solve these problems. And so I think it's really important to keep that in mind, that we all have a role to play, whether that be your full-time job or as a volunteer in your community. And we need resilient systems that allow life, human and other, to thrive at the lowest planetary cost we can have. And so with that, I'll stop and let everyone else go.
Amazing, amazing. I really like how you wrapped it up there. And I know we are going to bring Ashley back in a little bit, but before we do, I'll just ask a few questions for you.
Yeah.
I have to admit, that slide where it just says, so everything, and there's the globe. It's like, it's 2 words, but it's quite, it is overwhelming sometimes. But I think when I think in that moment, it's not just so everything, it's so everyone. I mean, This impacts every single person on our planet. And I think, for those that are tuning in right now, it can probably be a little daunting to think, not only like this problem is so big, but just also like, how am I going to play a role in this? Like, what am I going to do to contribute to this? And so obviously you've dedicated your career to understanding climate and to being a voice, not only on the scientific side, but on the communication side for this. But I guess, what are your thoughts about like empowering students to feel like, they might be just doing a poster for the Battelle Climate Challenge, but like how impactful that can be, and how, it can be just a stepping stone, to go on from here.
Yeah, I think like everything starts with small stepping stones often, right? And so something like doing a poster and just beginning to put your thoughts together and get them out, and beginning to even interact, with a few people in your community or even at your school level is really powerful, because those first steps are sort of what you need to realize that you can do these things, right? Like, it's overwhelming when you think about it from that so everything perspective, but then when you step back and you're like, well, that creates opportunity everywhere. And so then you just sit back and you think like, well, what are the things that are closest to me? What are the things I can affect in my immediate sphere of influence, and how do I step in? And when you take that first step and you meet someone at the Innovation Network and you put this poster together and you talk to people, then your sphere of influence grows incrementally, right? Every time you take that step, and then you make a little change in your school, or you talk to some people in your community as you put together your poster, and your sphere of influence grows. So it's a series of incremental steps, and opportunities arise along the way in all these different fields. So I think that the first small step, while it can feel like sometimes maybe it feels insignificant to you because it is tiny, it's not at all, because everything becomes incremental. And so you just need to start down that road, is my advice. And however that may be. Yeah.
That's great. And it's interesting because even just from a technology perspective, I know in the field of engineering, that's something I tell students a lot. It's just, you don't go out there making an invention thinking this is going to be the next huge invention. You just start with like solving a small problem and then figuring out how that can scale, like figuring out what other applications there might be. And so I think it's interesting with this challenge that you're saying that, with a student doing their project, like, thinking about their local community is the great way to start, or even just a hyper local. We don't really define community. Community could be your state, it could be your county, it could be your classroom, right? So it's just thinking about what seems achievable to you and how you can make that impact. And then once you make that poster and you can dive into that project and you understand it from A to Z, then you might think of other ways that this could grow or other ways that this could expand.
Yeah, exactly. And like you mentioned earlier, there's no one solution for all of this, right? Because it's so complex and it's interwoven into everything. So there's going to be a million different little solutions and changes that solve these problems. So I think of like, you shouldn't be shooting for some giant solving thing, right? Like all of us have to contribute little ways. Yep.
Yeah, and I have a question, because in terms of stepping stones and things, I mean, you presented all this amazing stuff. I from last year, I did not know you were going to the Taylor Swift concert. I can't believe you didn't tell me this. It's amazing.
It was so good.
But I love to think about like the stepping stones in your life, like when you think about you being a young kid, like what were some of the inspirations that really made you passionate about wanting to focus on this?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I grew up, and so it kind of all stems from like my father had an excavating company, like that's what he did. And so I grew up like driving backhoes and stuff since I was 12, and I was always like digging holes and playing in the dirt, helping him. And he was super into gardening too. He still is. And so I spent like my entire childhood rolling around in the dirt, I think, and digging holes, which is sort of how I got interested in soils. And from there, I was like, oh, when I went to college, and I loved the outdoors. I always have, I loved backpacking. I spent a lot of time in New Hampshire and Maine as a child, and canoeing and hiking. And so then when I went to college, I was like, oh, wow, you can like soil science is a thing. And I took a class and was like, oh, wow, this is really fascinating because it's really important for so many things. It's important for agriculture. It's important for water quality. It's important for global climate. It's important for all these things. And so I got really interested in it, how it's sort of the medium for life and water quality and even air quality to a large degree. And so that's sort of the stepping stone that went to it. And then I think it was just a natural progression because I guess it was also somewhat the timing in which I grew up was like parallel to sort of the explosion of climate as a topic, right? So there's just more and more opportunity to continue to, take your skill sets and grow in different directions and think about different things of interest to you. So yeah, I think it's, again, that little stepping stone of just seeing more things like, oh, this is interesting. Oh, that's a problem I'm interested in thinking about how you could solve and working towards that. Yeah.
I love that. I love hearing about how everyone has these sort of big influences or micro influences. And for you, it could be, for some people, it could be as simple as I like to hike. I like to be in nature. Like,
yeah.
This is just a place I want to protect. And then for like, actually, so my brother's a meteorologist and we grew up in Florida, and, we get hurricanes all the time.
Okay.
And it's funny because then he grew up and became a meteorologist. And I don't think ever really, it's like, think about all these influences in your life, but when you have, in that sense, it's like catastrophic influences in your life. Sometimes they become influences, and sometimes they're just these really positive, like I love the dirt. I have a connection with dirt.
Yeah.
And I want this dirt to be clean and a clean place for my kids and for others,
Yeah.
So it's just amazing how everyone kind of takes all those influences and applies them to all these different verticals, whether it's science or policy or this or that, right?
Yeah, and it evolves through life too. Like I love to cook as well. It's probably my favorite thing to do. And I've thought a lot. I think a lot about now, like, the influence of climate change on ingredients and like food culture, because it's really fascinating to me to think about like, oh, what's going to happen to like Durham wheat production and how's that going to affect local pastas in Italy, like things like that. Or if you've read about like the Thai chili peppers and sriracha shortage globally, like things like that.
I have it.
Yeah. So there's like, it's really, there's like a massive sriracha shortage due to like a failed chili crop largely. So like those things are really fascinating to me, and other things I think about, and they're all interwoven into everything, right? Like that becomes populations and food and culture and nutrition and everything. It's all interwoven. It's really interesting.
Yeah, and I think it brings back to this local influence. I mean, I'm in California now, and obviously agriculture is a huge part of our economy here, but there's definitely areas in the nation where agriculture is like the main thing. And so, thinking about local impacts, like we said, if you're on the coast, it's going to be very different than, if you're in Iowa, and thinking about what are the influences there. So really great stuff. I have so many more questions for you, but I'd love to bring Ashley back in so we can have a group Q&A. And I just want to remind everyone here that's watching, if you have questions that you want to submit, go ahead and submit them. And we will take your questions live here with Mike and Ashley. But I have no shortage of questions. So I'm going to start by continuing on some of these questions. Mike and Ashley, I'm going to ask a little bit about the conference because you guys were there last year for the first conference. So I guess, Mike, can you just give me a tee-up of the Climate Resiliency Conference, like where the grand prize winner is going to go and present their poster? Can you just tell me a little bit about that event? And I think it's the second year now that Battelle's done that. And I guess, and just in a broader sense, the value of convening, the value of bringing people together.
Yeah. So I actually missed the conference last year because I was in the Arctic taking permafrost course. but
we forgive you. And I want to say I totally misspoke earlier. It was in Columbus, Ohio last year. It's in Washington, D.C.
It's in D.C. this year. Yeah.
I'm sorry about that earlier.
But yeah, the conference goal, the conference and the convening is really important, right? It's super great to bring people together to talk about a topic, and inviting industry leaders and scientific leaders, which they do for the Battelle-National Climate Conference, from across the country in all these different fields, to hear talks from these people who are working at like the forefront of their different fields and hear about their expertise, and then have the chance to mingle with them and chat with them and network with them after, and to also, present your own ideas and have them see them, is really important, because it's oftentimes, you hear something in someone's talk that triggers some idea you had never thought of before, right? And then you're often running in a new direction, or you have some piece of something you're working on that suddenly you realize connects to something someone else is working on. And if you hadn't heard that talk and you hadn't convened with them, you might not have made that connection in your mind. And then when you're in the same place with them, it's really important, because then you can go and make that connection in an actual conversation with people. And that's why I feel like scientific conferences are so important, because it allows for that sharing of ideas, and not only the sharing of ideas that you might get from reading a paper, but also the ability to follow up and actually continue and create those collaborations, which can lead to really revolutionary problem solving. So, yeah.
And what I love, I think, is, Battelle acknowledges that, the voices in this room need to not only be the 40-year-olds like myself, but we need to of voices. And I think it's really, really great that they're committed to making sure that there's basically a representative of our youth there at that conference, sharing their winning entry. And so, Ashley, I guess just chat with me about your experience at that conference and what it was like to, share your seed bond project and to talk with others about kind of, I don't know, like what's next for you and what's next for that project.
Yeah, of course. I'd say initially when I was at the conference, I was very scared and nervous, mainly because I was the only kid there around so many incredible experienced experts. And so at first it was a bit hard to kind of open up and kind of talk to the others. But over time, I kind of told myself that this is once in a lifetime opportunity. So I should just go for it. The phrase fake it till you make it. So I kind of just kind of put my confidence out there and tried to mingle amongst with the others. And I'd say it was a very humbling and honestly the most incredible experience I've had all throughout high school. I think that's my favorite moment. I'd say just getting to be just even being there just to attend all these workshops and these, I believe, the experts series talks, which is really wonderful, just to kind of from all the experience I've had in high school, just reading literature reviews and just kind of learning based off from the internet, but then getting to hear from people in person, like what Mike said, just kind of getting to hear what people talk about was something I think that any high school students that have the opportunity should definitely try to get into, and just to kind of hear from experts, talk to them, kind of really exchange ideas. Because I also think that even though we the youth might not really have as much knowledge, because when we're in high school we're not having a lot of credibility, but just kind of getting to hear from two perspectives is really important, because it kind of fills that gap, the age gap. And then I also really loved about just genuinely getting to connect and getting to see what fields in environmental science I might want to consider. Like before then, I was only considering like bio, just like the bioscience. But then now I kind of want to like open up to engineering and technology. So I think it's a really awe-inspiring opportunity from the conference for sure.
That's great. Ashley, can I add one more quick thing on Ashley's comment? It's great to hear you say, that you went out there and talked to everyone. And I remember, being younger at conferences when I first attended them, and I was like, oh, in the same mood, I was like, oh, it's scary to go up and talk to these people, and I'm nervous about it. But now that I've kind of switched it. I'm the older person. Talking to younger researchers and students who are there is like my favorite part of the conference. It's by far the best. So so it's great that you went up to talk to people, because it's a joy for us too to like have those interactions, and I look forward to it more than anything else at conferences. So whoever ends up attending in the future, just keep that in mind. People are excited to talk to you. Yeah.
Great. And it could be one of you watching this webinar that's at the conference presenting your next project. And we have some questions that have come in from the audience. A couple for Ashley, but I'm gonna do the question for Mike first. We have a question from Lucy. Thanks so much for submitting. Mike, what do you think is the most critical climate topic out of everything you've covered? That's a big one there, Mike.
That is a big one.
And if you want to punt and say there's not one, you can do that.
Well, I don't want to completely punt. I think it's they're all really important, right? But I think one that's going to be really challenging is food production, right? As climates change and things, as the climate shifts and precipitation shifts, and water resources may not be available where you can think about the Colorado River, right? And how its flow has been declining rapidly. And so what does that mean for food production along it, and for those communities, water resources? So I think water, as it relates to food, shifting water and precipitation and drought are big ones. But also it's all like I've been talking about, like it's all interrelated in my mind. So it's tough to say one, because you take that and then you're like, oh, but fire is really important. And then, and you think, oh, and migration of things like mosquitoes and disease is really important. So it's really difficult to say. And so that's why I find it so interesting that like everything's involved. And I just try to, rather than think of it as so much problems, like, oh my God, as so many opportunities, right? That's the best way. That's what keeps me from getting like down in the dumps about it and being like, I give up.
Yeah. I mean, different people are going to have a different view on what is most important, but it's important that that we're communicating and advocating for all of those. I know that the communication side of it is hard when there's so many different things. Like how do you advocate for all these different things? So I guess I have a question for Ashley. I guess there's some questions here in the audience, but I had a question for Ashley, and there's no right or wrong answer. Like, to enter this contest, there was no requirement of taking this the next step. But did you consider that? Did you think about like, I want to take this to the next step? Was that daunting to try to think about, talking locally for doing this? Or I guess just talk to me about that, about where you went with your project, or did you?
Yeah, I guess like more specifically, to clarify more, like bringing this project into life, correct?
Yeah, like seed bomb. I know in theory for the contest, it just has to be a theoretical climate action, right? Did you think about like, has this gone into effect, or is that something you've thought about, or something, you've sent to anyone?
Yeah, so the idea is very practical and feasible that could actually be done right now. But and also in my proposal, I did mention and refer to one of my local eelgrass restoration site. So the idea itself can already be easily implemented. However, I did not have the opportunity to be able to bring this to life due to the time constraint and the limited resources that I had over the summer. But I am very interested in hopefully improving the idea in college and hopefully get more feedbacks from like my professors and GSI at my college, just to kind of before just like putting out there, get feedback, see if there's any improvements. And there's definitely flaws in it, but I'm hoping in the future I could very much. But as of right now, I haven't had the opportunity, but I would say that it's definitely something that could really like bring in the community. Like
Yeah.
kind of briefly mentioned for my proposal, it's very much like you can bring in a lot of community age groups. Like there's no one like you can't. It's not limited to just one age group. It can be like young students, adults. Like there's no training needed. So I think that's something really valuable about Seed Bomb.
Got it. And that's what I love. I'm going to conferences and things too. Sometimes you can have this idea and you're like, I think it's okay. And then you get validation at some of these things, or you get encouragement, or you get support networks or refinement of these things, right? It's sometimes important just to like, get this out now. And other times it's like, no, like, let's figure this out and build the networks to really do this right and to push it out. So great answers all around. So I have a question, Ashley, for you. How long did it take to make your poster? And the second one is kind of for me. Is it okay to do a hand-drawn poster? Will I get scored lower if it's not digital? From the contest perspective, it is totally okay to do a hand-drawn poster. There is no requirement of doing digital design or hand-drawn, and you will not score lower just because it's hand-drawn. I think the emphasis is just on, just clarity of communication of that poster. And definitely look at the scoring rubric on the website for your whole entry. Judges judge using a rubric, like to assign score values. So make sure you think about it. Look at your project and think about, if I was a judge, how would I view this, using this scoring criteria to think about how it's going to score the best. But no problem at all doing hand-drawn. Ashley, I guess and we talked a little bit about your design process earlier, but how long did it take you about to make your poster?
I believe I started in November, so I'd say about 2 to 3 months. Like I didn't work on it every day, but I'd work on it like sporadically throughout the days when I had ideas and stuff.
Got it. So you kind of like let it simmer. Obviously, no one's drawn a poster for 2 months. No, there's no.
Yeah,
You could do it in an hour if you really needed to. No one has
detailed
expectations too high. But it sounds like she kind of let her idea simmer and kind of went back to it and was like, I'm sure did you show it to anyone? And they're gonna be like, what does this look like to you?
No, I kind of
You
kept
did?
it all to myself.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. So you just threw it in and you're like, fingers crossed, hope they like it.
Yeah.
She won. She's got good instincts, everyone. I like it. Okay, so we have a question here, and I'm going to address this to you, Mike. Is there anything we can do daily to help the environment? So you talked a little bit about that. There's so many different factors. We need technology, we need infrastructure, we need this, but also there's just sort of our consumer habits. And I think you addressed, we don't all just need to like sit in a corner and be like, cannot consume. We need to, go about our daily activities. But what are some of the daily things people can do or think about, to help the environment?
Yeah, I mean, they span like a whole element of like how much resources they take and money it costs to do them to very simple things, right? So it's all sorts of things. You can, it depends on also what you're thinking about it. But I mean, like simple things you can do. I'm really interested in like the plastic problem. I continue to be, and it's also a climate problem because it uses a lot of oil and natural gas, which leads to additional leaking of methane and things like that. But thinking about eliminating single-use plastics from your life is like one of the simplest things you can do, and it makes a difference, right? And especially because recycling is incredibly ineffective. At this point in time, it's only about 10% of global plastic recycled in years at best that's ever happened, maybe. And so it's
really that's all we're up to is 10% at this point.
Yeah, it's a very difficult problem. But there's a lot of work going into that, and Battelle's doing a lot of work on plastics and microplastics, and so there's a lot of work there. But like cutting out single-use plastics is a really simple thing you can do. I think about things like, as you do move to colleges and things like that, and you finish high school, thinking about, can I, when you're living in the dorms and then you're like, I have the chance to move off campus, thinking about moving to a place where you can bike to your classes and walk to stores, and thinking about making choices around like structuring your life. I think when you have change coming, to be in a place where you can start to walk or make those choices. But, that's not possible for everyone. But if you do have the freedom to do those things, thinking about those is really important. I think being mindful of, your resource use, like, are you using a ton of water? Could you use less? Are there ways to be more efficient? Can you turn off lights? All those simple things, they do add up. And I think also being involved in your local community is really important, because there's these little things you can do, but there's also this need for like the systemic change, which actually drives more of it, right? So you can get involved in, you know, your university and think, as you get older, your school, and think about like sustainability groups on campus that are looking to make changes and push the administration to make changes to increase the efficiency of, you know, buildings and increase the efficiency of use of resources. So all of those things, I think you can do little things yourself and be mindful of what you're doing and stay informed. But getting involved in the things at your local level or in communities or in programs you're part of is really where you can start to affect more change. So I think those are the two keys I see, is staying informed and getting involved. Yeah.
Great, good answers. I know when you were talking about plastics, you mentioned methane. I'm just going to go there and like in terms of like Climate 101. I know we talk about carbon emissions all the time, but then there's methane over here. Can you talk about like the two of these? Is there one that's a greater threat? They're both like
so they're
how
both,
are scientists addressing that right now?
you can think about it as there's two different, I guess, so a good way to think about it is you could think of like two blankets, right? Like in one blanket, CO2 is this thick, and then methane is another blanket, which there's, you know, you don't have as many of, but it's that thick, right? So it has a lot more warming potential. So even though CO2 is there's so much of it being emitted that it's the dominant forcing mechanism for leading to climate change, methane is many times more powerful at trapping heat than CO2 is. So even though there's less of it being emitted, it creates a lot of impact on the climate. And also it's a lot of, you know, anthropogenic point source things like gas wells and natural gas wells that are leaking and things like that. So it's also something that we as a society can focus on and target pretty effectively, I think. So there's a lot of ability to think about how we do that and how we address methane leakage and methane's contribution to climate moving forward. And I think it's, if you start to look at some of the documents that have come out of the White House in recent years, you can start to see that focus is there, and there's a need to really think about these emissions and these leakages. But yeah, there's less methane in the atmosphere than CO2, but methane's really powerful as a heat trapping gas. So it has a big influence, even though it's less of it. If that makes sense.
That makes sense. I've never heard that analogy before. It's like my bed sheet and my duvet cover.
Exactly. Yeah, totally. Right.
Got it. Interesting. Really, really great way to explain it. See, you're really good at science communication. I love it. We need to do more webinars with you, Mike. All right, great. So we have more questions coming in. Feel free to keep putting them into the chat. We have a question here about what advice do you give to teachers to have students for climate resiliency career options? And Mike, I'm going to direct that to you. You know, it's one thing to be an individual citizen of this globe. It's another thing to think about your own consumer habits, but it's another thing to be an educator, really trying to, you know, inspire the next generation to do projects such as these and things like that. So I guess what like encouraging words do you have for educators, or advice for educators do you have?
Yeah, I think so. This is where I think it's really cool, is because it's such a big topic that you can kind of, like, climate resilience itself is like, I don't think of it as a topic. It's like climate resilience coupled with something else. Like, are you climate resilience coupled with science and research? Or are you climate resilience coupled with like communication and journalism? So like, I think teachers should be mindful of that and think about when they're talking to their students, like, what are some of the core interests you have that could be combined with climate resilience or climate adaptation, and then think about it that way. And I also think another thing that's really important in this whole field is to like understand, I mean, there's so much information out there about climate resilience, and depending where you go, you can end up with things that are wildly and factually wrong, right? So I think that idea of, as an educator, teaching your students to like research and consider sources and consider like what are good sources and how to reference them and how to follow information to its original source, and to be mindful of, even if you pick up, I don't know, USA Today or what have you, and I'm not picking on them for any reason, I'm just the first thing that came to mind, and you read something in there and there's some fact in there that you're like, oh, that's really interesting, but to like go back, and if you're like, oh, that's weird or interesting, to like take the next step and think like, where did that come from, and try to find it. And like that sort of critical thinking, research following, I think is so important for multiple reasons, to be on the right path and to be know where your things are coming from, and to understand problems in a world that is loaded with a lot of misinformation. Yeah. important.
It's really, really important. Good sources, but then even on the website for this challenge, it talks about these steps of going through this process. So I think it's important to think about those steps and think about all those different factors. So really, really great stuff. I have a question here. I think this one's actually for me. Is it okay if my project is not hyper local? Like if I do something around my state, not my city? Yes. So as we mentioned before, community is defined how you want to define it. So, think about, what local means to you. So if you want to do something around your whole state, you're welcome to do that. We just want you to think about, your region as you choose to define it. So that's a great question there. We have another question for Ashley. How did it feel to be a winner?
That's a great question.
So, and I guess I can talk a little bit about the process. So, there's all the entries get submitted, and then we have amazing judges. Mike was a judge last year, I believe. Is that correct? So we have amazing judges that review all of these. So you have, climate scientists and researchers reviewing these proposals to pick those that go onto the semifinalists. So we have 10 semifinalists, and then our judges, and then we choose 5 finalists, and then our judges actually do an interview, a virtual interview with those 5 finalists where you get to present your project, and then one winner is selected. And so last year it was Ashley. So in that moment, I guess talk to us about the interview. How was that? Was that nerve-wracking or was that fun? And then talk to you realized you were the winner.
Yeah. So during the interview, I definitely practiced a lot on the presentation because I guess the driving force to why I wanted to do this content was mainly for just to be able to attend the conference and learn a lot from others. And so I was very driven into wanting to do my absolute best and try to accumulate all the knowledge I've had in the past and pour them all into that one interview just to kind of give it all, And so during the interview, I guess I tried to make sure that I wasn't too nervous because it would be very evident through my voice and through my posture and stuff. And so I made sure that I try to make sure I had fun and kind of it is what it is, time I have that mentality. And so that kind of really helped me be able to say my idea in a more comfortable setting. And I guess when I remember vividly, I was very nervous. I kind of kept checking the date and time to see when the results will come out. So I was really nervous. I kept checking, and then at some point at night at 8 p.m. I believe it was when Tanya gave me a call, and I was like, oh my gosh. I actually didn't pick up the call because I missed the call, but I recalled and I heard, and I was so excited. I was really excited. I was also low-key also kind of excited to be able to miss school and be able to attend the conference New Year. So it was really fun time. Yeah,
That's
and then I think
awesome.
which was really nice. Yeah, skipping school. I know that's something that I don't emphasize any students to do, but for this, yeah, maybe skip school fun, but I was
That's
really,
the
really
third time
excited.
she said that now. When you were learning when you were out of school.
Yes.
You were learning. I love it. And you said earlier I had to fake it till I make it, fake it till you make it, which is really funny. I didn't get the impression at all that you were faking it. And then
Yeah.
and you made it. You did a great job. So that's awesome. So good to hear kind of that journey of everything. And you did seem really calm and composed and
Absolutely. Yeah, you did.
yeah. Wow, I can get the secret dish here. So I know we're getting close to time, but Mike, I would be disappointed in myself if I didn't ask you a little bit more about Antarctica and your experience in the field. I know you weren't at the conference last year because you were up in the Arctic taking course. I guess just talk to me about field research and what that's like, and I don't know, how do you even get there? Are you there? Are you wintering over? Are you there in the summer? Just talk to me about that experience.
Yeah,
that can be.
Antarctic research is wild. It's incredible. It's really amazing. And yeah, getting there, you fly from wherever you live. I mean, if you're going to McMurdo in the Dry Valleys, or you can go to Palmer Station, which is kind of on the peninsula by the tip of South America. But I would go to McMurdo. So I'd fly from Boulder to New Zealand, and then you'd stay in Christchurch, New Zealand. And then in Christchurch, they would give you all your like Antarctic gear. You'd go to this place and you get your bunny boots, which are these like old army boots that are good to like minus 100 degrees, which have like these vapor barrier boots. They look like big, huge rabbit feet, which is why they're called bunny boots. But then you get all that gear, and then you fly on a military plane, like a C-135, to Antarctica, and you land on the frozen ocean in McMurdo Sound, which is just crazy. And when you step off the plane there, it's mind-boggling. Like it's like being on another planet. And the weirdest thing is the smell, because there's no vegetation. And never in your life have you ever been somewhere without the smell of vegetation. So it's just like this weird absence of aroma that I
would have never thought about that.
Yeah,
like
it's
no
mind-boggling.
There's no anything.
Yeah,
Wow.
there's no vascular plant.
The
So there's
smell of ice.
Yeah, exactly. It's this really, and then you go and you learn a bunch about safety. They put you in this thing called snow school, where you go out and you camp in the snow for a couple nights with people, and they put you in a cohort and they teach you how to use all this gear and to set up your tents and to like put stakes in the snow and a way to tie your tent down. And you have to do this thing where you rope up with white buckets over your head, so you're prepared for whiteouts and like get from one place to another with white 5-gallon pails over your heads as a team and all this crazy stuff. And then you fly out by helicopter and you go out to this field camp, and you're basically like living in tents, and there's a little hut with like some satellite Wi-Fi and a propane cooking stove, and you do your research there, and you're trudging around, and it's just this wild experience to see this part of the earth that so few people get to. And that's where I really started also like getting into science communication, because I was like, why aren't there more like just interesting stories about like what it just takes to do research in Antarctica? Because it's absurd, like how complicated it is and how hard it is. And so it's this fascinating experience. So I encourage everyone to like at some point in their life try to get there. And you could either do it as a researcher, or they hire tons of people every year to go there and help cook, or to help in the libraries and help do all these things there, or carpenters. And so whatever you're into, I recommend trying to find your way there at some point. It gives you a real sense of like, it gives you a different sense of the planet, I feel like, and what it means, and like how vast it is and how big it is and like how magical it is. And then when you come back to New Zealand and you finally smell plants again, that's when you realize you didn't smell them. And it blows your mind.
And I think I think it's important to note that your field research is one data point, but I know with NEON and other, like there's data collection everywhere. And to Ashley's point of the value of data science, it's like, how do we take all of this meaningful work that everyone's doing on all these remote corners of the planet, aggregate it, synthesize it in a way that becomes useful, that you can make decisions on, right?
Yeah. It's challenging because everyone collects their data in a slightly different way. So how do you combine it all and make sure, and all the conversations in data science that go to merging data are really complicated? So that's a whole thing. And then you mentioned NEON collecting everywhere. This is actually something that's really relevant to everyone probably on this call, is that we hire like hundreds of field scientists for the NEON program each summer to collect data across the continent. So wherever you are, we're hiring field scientists near you every summer for field work in the summers. So it's a really cool way to learn a lot about ecology and how data gets collected and see beautiful ecosystems. Yeah.
Get involved. So I know we are at time, but I just want to say thank you to Mike and to Ashley for being here today and sharing all this great knowledge with everyone. And I also just want to remind everyone that's been tuning in here today that all the resources are at futureengineers.org/Battelle. I'm going to make sure I don't say this wrong. Battelle Climate Challenge. Yeah. So futureengineers.org/Battelle Climate Challenge is where all of the resources are. Entries are due by January 19th. And, we can't wait to see your projects. We can't wait to see the posters that you put forth and the descriptions that you put forth as well. And we just can't wait for you to dive into the project, to be honest. It's just so valuable to go through this process, to learn about the impacts and the climate hazards in your local community, and to think of solutions. And it is so needed, and your voice is so important, and Battelle recognizes that and acknowledges that, and we just can't wait to hear your ideas. So thank you, everyone. Mike and Ashley, if you want to just say some goodbyes here, we're going to wrap things up.
Go ahead, Ashley.
Well, I hope everyone who wants to consider this is just to be very genuine with self, be very curious and have a lot of fun. I think that regardless of the status of your project, I think that that's just rewarding just to go through and be curious, just be important to have fun. Don't stress too much about it, but just really like get to really learn more about your community and have a lot of fun for sure.
I love it. Dive in and have fun. And then Mike, what
Yeah,
kind of words do you
I would second that. This is a great opportunity to take a first step to like making a change with regards to the climate and your community. So be excited about it and jump in and don't be scared. It's fun and it's great. And don't be scared about like the contest you're speaking, because every time you speak to people publicly, it gets easier and easier and easier until at some point it's just fun. So yeah, so get in there. Yeah, thank you so much. Good to see you, Ashley, too.
Great. Dive in, have fun. Thank you so much for joining, and we can't wait to see your entries. And if you have questions at all, you can always email support@futureengineers.org. We're here with any clarifications on the contest rules or things like that, or any questions you may have. So thanks again for tuning in. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Ashley. And have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.